morning. Good morning. Go ahead and grab a piece of paper as you come in. Is it good now? Yeah. Okay. All right. I guess we'll start with a word of prayer, and then I'll start my presentation. So let's just bow our heads. Dear God, thank you for this day and for another day of life and for opportunities to learn more about you and more about how to serve you better. Please be with us as we are in this class. Give me the right words to say and help me to say things clearly. We love you. Amen. Good morning. Just grab a piece of paper off that back table as you come in. Sure. Thank you. All right. So today we're talking about intentional education, and I was just telling one of my friends I could not have asked for a better lead-in to this presentation than the talk we just had. He said, I wrote it down because it was perfect. He said, success in life demands a definite aim. And that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. I wanted to start with an introduction. My name is Melissa Clayton. I live on a very small garlic farm in northern Michigan with my husband and my two boys. My boys are 3 and 5. I have a bachelor's degree in education from Southern Adventist University, and I taught for several years in both multi-grade, so 1 to 4 and in 5 to 8, and then I taught high school English and sciences, so biology and earth science. And I just started homeschooling, sort of, my 5-year-old. So to get started, I wanted to start with the definition of intentional. Intentional, according to Google, the Google dictionary, is done on purpose and deliberate. And I think that this is something that is important to us because as we're homeschooling our children as stay-at-home moms or work-from-home moms or dads, when we're home with our kids, it's very easy to lose our days because things just are chaotic. We have 5 million things to do on the farm. We have 5 million things to do in the house. And before you know it, the day is gone and you may feel like you've accomplished nothing. And so being intentional helps us to take control of our days again and actually feel like we're accomplishing something. And I do think that being intentional is the success to being successful as a homeschooling parent. So I wanted to start with a little bit, I'm sorry, I'm right in the way. I wanted to start with a little bit of a worship thought and some journaling, sort of, which is why I had you guys grab those pieces of paper. Looking at Proverbs chapter 24, verses 3 and 4, it says, "Through wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established. By knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches." And I think that this is a good verse to apply to our homes, but also to change a little bit and apply it to our children. Through wisdom, a man or woman is built, and by understanding it is established. By knowledge, the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches. And who doesn't want their children to be filled with precious and pleasant riches? So what we're going to do on those pieces of paper I asked you to grab, I hope everyone has pens or pencils, is we're just going to take a couple of minutes, and I want you to write down what are the things that you want your children to be filled with, and what are the expectations. Here we go. I have a list for you. What are the characteristics I want my home and or my child to have? What qualities do I want to fill the rooms of my home with? What do I want my family culture to look like? What routines do we have? What rituals, habits, what things do we do in our family that makes us special and unique? What are my priorities for educating my child? And what kind of people do I want my children to be? We're just going to give you about 5 minutes. I'm looking for, just write down as much detailed responses as you can, because the more specific you are, the more it helps you in creating a direction for your home. I think I have a pencil somewhere. 22. You got one? Perfect. Nope, it's just for this. It's going to take about 2 more minutes. All right, go ahead and finish the thought that you're working on. I know I didn't give you much time for this. I think that this is a great activity, exercise to do later when you're home, when you can time to think, to prayerfully answer these questions. But I did want you to kind of already have some wheels spinning so that as we continue through the presentation, you're getting some ideas. There's a website, it's called thelittlesandme.com, and she actually has a yearly, or a homeschool planning sheet that I found super helpful. She just lays out boxes for a lot of the things that we talked about here, our core values as a family, what are our holiday traditions if we have some, what are weekly and monthly anchors that we have, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. What are things that our family loves to do as a family? It goes into our homeschool culture, why we homeschool. At the end of our homeschooling journey, what do we want our children to remember? What are our life-giving anchors? The things, new life-giving anchors, things that we would like to establish to help keep our children focused and grounded, and us focused and grounded. What is our homeschool culture? What do we want it to look like? What do we want it to feel like? And then it goes into last year, if it's not your first year homeschooling, just reflection. What worked? What didn't work? What's our big takeaway? Moving forward, what do we look forward to this year? What are some things that we'd like to do? At the end of the year, what do we want to be able to say about that year? So it's from the littlesandme.com. I do have a slide of resources, and if you had the handouts, the resources are in the handouts as well. But this is just a great planning tool for the beginning of your year or wherever you are to help you really focus in on what things are important to your family, because, we'll take questions at the end. Because when you know the things that are important to you, it makes hard decisions a lot easier. Let's see. Okay, so I want to just go through kind of a framework to help you in planning. Wow, I'm behind on my notes here. Here we go. To help you as you're planning your year. And we're going to talk about, it's really a 4-step process. And I did it in a circle because this isn't a thing that is one and done. This is something that is constantly moving and changing because life is constantly moving and changing, right? Somebody goes to college, or there's a new baby, or somebody had to go get a job, or, life changes. So your plans have to change, and they need to be flexible. But that's why this exercise with our core goals and values is important, because those are the things that we don't want to change. Everything else needs to be flexible. So we're going to talk about prioritizing, because that should happen first. And that's kind of what we did with this exercise. We started to think about what are our priorities. And then we're going to talk about planning, giving yourself guardrails. We'll talk about that, but it's setting up things to help keep you on track. Even though you move around side to side, it keeps you from falling off a cliff. Implement and adjust. And we're not really going to talk about these much because that's kind of, you do what you planned and you make adjustments as necessary. So, and I think that this is important. Like when you're building a house, you have an architect and they draw up a blueprint. You can change your plans, but you don't build a house with no plans. Or pilots, they have a flight plan and they have to adjust course throughout the trip, but they don't not have a plan because they need to get to their destination and you need a plan to get there. So, and another thing that I just want to add is I know that sometimes I've experienced frustration because I make all these great plans and then nothing happens. Or 2 days later, everything is disrupted by you name it. But I think that this still holds a lot of value and is still an important thing to do, because every time you set goals and you work towards those goals, even if you don't completely reach those goals, you're improving and you're making steps towards achieving that goal. And so if you need a new plan, that's fine, but you still have your goal. And every step you take towards that goal, you're getting better. All right, so first thing is prioritizing. This is where you need to decide what works for your family. And this is different for everybody. We all have different lives. I'm talking here about schedules and activities. I'm talking about keeping your home in order, the dishes and the laundry that never end. Organization. We're going to talk just a tiny bit about homeschooling methods and about curriculums and standards. Okay, so first one, home management, organization, and time. I feel like this is a huge one for us that stay at home with our kids. I feel like the woman in this picture a lot. I don't know about any of you. You just mop the floor and the kids come running in from the garden and track muddy footprints all over and slap slugs down on the table. Yeah, that's happened at my house. But that's life and that happens, but there are things we can do to help. So the first thing is too much stuff and clutter is known to cause an increase in the stress hormone. And so maybe we need to evaluate the stuff that we have in our home. Is your stuff getting in the way of serving your purpose. Because if you're spending all your time cleaning up all the junk that we accumulate, and I'm talking about my family, we're not able to serve our purpose. Cleaning and home management tasks can be planned into your day and can serve as educational opportunities. Your kids should be helping you do the laundry, helping you do the dishes. Even when they're young and they can't do it all by themselves. My kids unload the dishwasher onto the island because they can't reach the shelves. Or they put their laundry in the washing machine, but they can't reach it, so I start it. Those kinds of things. Also to note, you should be creating some kind of a workspace for your homeschooling. It doesn't have to be a room. My house is very small. We don't have a room. We work at the kitchen table, but my kids have totes that are, each one has their own tote, so they have their space, they know where their stuff is, and when it's time to do school, which in my house right now is about 10 minutes once or twice a week, because my kids are 5 and 3. But they have their space that they're in charge of, and we work at the kitchen table. It has good light, and we keep it a clean area so that they can focus on their schoolwork and not on all the toys everywhere. And I think it's important, too, to remember that balance is key. We only have such a short time with our kids at home, and sometimes it's not worth stressing about the dishes in the sink or the mountain of laundry in the laundry room. Sometimes you just need to ignore it and spend time with your kids. So, enough about that. Homeschooling methods. Now, this is a very, very, very oversimplified definitions of just a few of the homeschooling methods that are out there. If you just Google like a list of homeschooling methods, you can come up with much more detailed descriptions. But I think that it's valuable for us as homeschooling parents to kind of understand a little bit about the different methods that are out there, because it helps us make decisions about what we resonate with and what we think would work for our family, because it helps you find resources that kind of align with what you think and feel works for you. And there's obviously a lot of overlap between some of these methods, and I don't think any of us fit specifically into one box. But when you have these ideas in your mind, you can create your own version. Another thing to talk about real quick is learning styles. We've probably all been to 100 lectures or read books or something about learning styles. We're not going to talk about them. But I think if you have not done any research on this, do it. You should really, as a parent, you need to know what your learning style is. And you should be working to understand what your child's learning style is, because how you decide to homeschool needs to work for you. Because if it doesn't work for you, it's not going to work for your child. But it also needs to work for your child. And to take that even further, it is important to teach your child according to their learning style, but also to push them and help them develop the skills to be able to learn no matter how information is being presented, because that's life. We don't always get to learn according to our learning style. So if you don't know much about them, do some reading, listen to some podcasts, just something. I don't know why that's in their choice. All right. Next thing, standards. Oh, my notes are all out of order. I hate it when that happens. All right, standards have kind of been given a bad name. And I think that has to do with the fact that they're closely related to standardized testing. But I just want to say standards are not the big, bad, scary, terrible thing that I often hear from people. I use standards with my children, and let me show you how, or explain to you how. The NAD, and this is the website, the North American division has a website that gives you all of the standards for every grade. So if you're following typical grades, you can go on and say your child is in 4th grade, get the NAD standards for the 4th grade. The NAD creates their standards somewhat based on the state standards or various state standards. There's different standards. You have standards by state and you have the NAD standards. But they're all pretty similar. The NAD has just made theirs has a focus on God. So when I print off my standards, this is how a rough guide, a map for me of what my child needs to learn in kindergarten. Now for us, kindergarten, my child is 5. Kindergarten's probably going to be the next 2 or 3 years until he's ready to actually do a little more. We take it very slow. We move how he wants to move at this age. But I printed off a list of the kindergarten standards, and you sort through them. There's Bible standards. I'm not really worried about the Bible standards. We have our family worship. We do Bible studies. We go to adventurers. We go to church. We are intentional about our biblical education, but I'm not following the standards for that because I don't think it's necessary. Fine arts, music, art, that kind of thing. Also, not worried about those standards because we do these things and we do them intentionally, but we do them based on what my child is interested in, and I'm not worried about following the standards. For younger grades, what I'm pulling out here are my language arts standards. Language arts is my reading, my writing, English, that kind of thing, and my math standards. I'm not even at a younger grade, I'm not even worried about science. I'm not worried about social studies. We are doing those things, but I'm not worried about the standards and following them. But for language arts and for math, I'm printing off those standards, and I turn these into a checklist. So at the beginning of the year, I went through and I read each of these standards and checked off the things that I know my child is already proficient at, because we don't need to worry about those things. And then, when I look at what's left, now I know what my focus needs to be for this year. So when we talk about curriculums in just a minute, I have a curriculum that I purchased, and I'll be honest, I don't use it. There's a lot of busy work, there's a lot of fluff, and I just don't feel like my child needs to spend 2 hours a day at the table in kindergarten doing schoolwork. I use these standards. We learn the things that are in these standards while we're doing life. My child's learning about temperature as we're out checking the thermometers in the greenhouse and comparing it to the thermometers outside. My child's learning about measuring by helping me cook in the kitchen and by helping we're finishing our basement, by helping us measure the boards and cut things. Now, eventually, I will take that and we will do a couple of questions on a piece of paper so that he can understand how that translates from what we just did in real life to seeing a question on a piece of paper. Because if our children are going to go anywhere, if they're going to go to college or if someday they're going to go to a regular school, they need these tools. And so the other thing is that I am really intentional about using academic language. So when I'm teaching my child to add, I'm using words like addition and the sum, and we are going to add 3 plus 5 equals, and as you're getting into older grades, you may need to look up some of this language again because we're just not familiar with it. But using words like sum, dividend, quotient, using that academic language while you're doing your daily life is what's going to help your child make those connections from real life living to book learning. So, all right, I'm way off here. So planning, when I'm working on my plan for the year, I start with the broad strokes. So that means I'm looking at the standards and deciding which things I need to work on this year, and then roughly writing out a calendar of when I'm going to work on what. So that then when I'm looking at the month of November, I see, okay, I have these 4 standards that we're going to work on this week. That means this week I'm going to work on, with prompting, identify the main topic and key details. This is a reading informational text standard. So this week, as we're reading our books, it's informational text. So I'm going to find nonfiction books to read to my child. And as we're doing our story time, we're going to talk about how to identify the main idea and retell key details. And at the end of the week, if my child is doing really well with this, I'll probably check this standard off and move on to the next one. But I start with the year plan and just write out a few standards for each month and then assign those standards to weeks. And I fill in the details when I'm ready. And sometimes I don't even fill in the details. Now, I have spent extensive time writing lesson plans because I was a teacher, and in college you write a lot of lesson plans when learning to be a teacher. And so for some of us it comes very naturally to develop lesson plans, and I don't write things out. But maybe you need to write them out to help you be intentional and to make sure that you're accomplishing the things that you need to do. Also setting anchors for your days and for your weeks. So we talked about that a little bit, about how life can be chaotic. In my family, my husband is a house supervisor in a hospital, and he works 7 nights in a row, and then he's off the following 7 days. And so we have a week where it's just me and my kids for the whole week, and then the next week where it's the whole family together for the whole week. So our weeks look different from week to week, because when Dad's not home, we really buckle down. We do things in the house, make sure everything's in order, make sure that we're getting some of our schoolwork done, so that the next week when Dad's home, we're always together. We do projects as a family, we go hiking, we go kayaking, whatever it is. But we set anchors for our week so that our children have things that they can count on every week, no matter what's going on. So for us, our anchors look like adventurers and piano lessons are every Tuesday. Every Tuesday looks the same, and my kids know that. Church on Sabbath is another anchor. That's something that we do every single week. And your anchors are going to look different depending on your life. But what are the things that are set in your schedule that don't change? That's just something to help you plan. And then finding creative ways to build experiences, learning experiences into your daily lives. And it's very important to remember that some people need a lot more structure than others. I'm sure there's people in this room who have color-coded, detailed schedules and hanging up on their wall, and that's great. I'm not that person, but I have a child that is that person. And so that's important to remember too, is that just because you work one way does not mean your child works that way too. And you need to work on ways to meet in the middle so that your life can run as it needs to, but you're also meeting the needs of your child who needs to know what's happening next. And that's a normal thing for kids. That's a normal thing for some adults. I'm totally off here, so. All right, but coming back, we want to start with prioritizing and then make a plan, implement your plan, set your guardrails. What are the things that you do to make sure your family stays on track? And then adjust, make changes as necessary. Some resources that I have found super helpful that I really like as far as getting my home in order. The Minimal Mom on YouTube. She has videos about decluttering and laundry management systems. And I just want to say, like, housekeeping is a learned skill. Maybe some of us learned it from our parents growing up. I did not. I had to learn all of this as I became an adult and got married and had kids. Learning how to manage a house was overwhelming. But that was a really helpful resource for me to just learn how to make everything work. The Call of the Wild and Free by Ainsley Armette, it's a book. And she goes through homeschool methods, and there's a lot of valuable information for homeschoolers. Also, Balanced and Barefoot, 7 Habits of Highly Effective Parents. There's an organization or a group called 1,000 Hours Outside. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of it. This was started, I don't even know what to call it, a movement. A woman who realized that the average American child spends 3 hours a day in front of a screen. And so she changed it, and she said, we need to have our children spending 3 hours a day outside. And much of that should be an unstructured free play. And so if you average that out, it turns into about 1,000 hours a year. And so there's Facebook groups, there's a website, but it's just parents who have set this as a goal to get their children outside for at least 1,000 hours a year. There's trackers that you can use, and I like the tracker because especially, I'm northern Michigan, when it's -20, it's very helpful to have a checklist to say, okay, I have to get my kids outside for at least a little while today so we can put another check on our chart. The homeschool planning sheet that I talked about earlier from the littlesandme.com. And then the last one is this website here talks about homeschool laws by state. That's something that we maybe don't always want to talk about, but there are state laws, and they're different for every state, for what you're required to submit or report on your child's homeschooling. And I would just add to that, however you choose to do your homeschooling, document, document, document. Because you don't know, or maybe you do know, but the future, you don't know what the future is going to bring. And if at some point your child wants to do something different, having a trail, a paper trail, having proof of what they've done will be valuable. So, how did I do in time? I think we have a few minutes for questions. Otherwise, I think we finished just a couple minutes early. Yeah.
What are some of the things that you do for character building?
So I think that character building is a very personalized thing because I think our kids struggle with different things just like we do. I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, so we're very much learning. With my 5-year-old, he needs more of a schedule and more of a routine. It really upsets him when he doesn't know what to expect next. And so we try to provide that to him, but also try to work through things with him so that because of our lifestyle, it's hard to have a real schedule. And my husband, he's a travel nurse, and so every 3 months his schedule is totally different. And so that's really a challenge for our family, is giving him what he needs, but still fitting it into a life that changes more than most. And so there's sometimes tantrums that happen when we don't know what to expect. And so we work hard to make sure that we're giving him enough structure that he feels comfortable, but also trying to help him understand that, life happens and you're okay. Like, we still have all of these things that are the same. And also, I think a big thing of character building is just chores, work, and teaching our children to push through things. We do a lot of outdoor work and outdoor activities like hiking, and there are often like sit downs and I'm not going any further, and just trying to push through those things. When we get to the top of this hill, we'll sit down and have a snack. Or I think a lot of it's just patience and trying to understand why, because I think that obviously we're naturally sinful and selfish, but also a lot of the times that our children are having outbursts or struggling with something, there's things we can do to help them feel better while still.
Like practical through life experiences and not
Yeah.
necessarily like any kind of textbook resources or anything.
Yeah. Very much. We have the Bible has all of our. I have 25 minutes still? I thought it was until, I'm sorry. Here I am thinking I had to end at 10. Okay, I know I missed a lot because I went way off track. Thanks, Angela. I don't remember talking about this one at all. Okay, so as far as planning, I guess I just want to come back and really talk about that one more. When I was in college, I was taking a physical education. It was called Physical Education Methods, because I went to Southern Adventist University, and they have a methods block. So you take language arts methods and science methods and math methods, and it's all about how to teach each of those different subjects. So in my PE methods class, we had an assignment where our professor made us write out every 30 seconds of a 30-minute class period. And we had to create a spreadsheet with what the time was, and then the spreadsheet had to say where the students were going to be, what the students were going to be doing, what materials we needed for that activity, and where we were going to be as the teacher. And when the professor gave us that assignment, I thought it was the dumbest assignment ever. I was like, when am I ever going to write out every 30 seconds of a plan? And you don't. But by having to do that assignment, it really made you start to think about what are all of the materials that I am going to need for this whole lesson. So that when you're teaching the lesson, now when you're dealing with a homeschool group and you only have your couple of kids, or maybe even some other local homeschooler groups from your area, It's not as big of a deal. When you're dealing with a class of 30 eighth graders, you can't leave them alone for 3 minutes to go grab the materials you left, because that is asking for chaos. And so having that mental checklist to make sure that you have all of the materials that you need for your class was super important. But then also, by mapping out every 30 seconds of what you're going to do, it made you super intentional about your time. And I think that as homeschooling parents, at least for me and my family, there's never enough time to get done all of the things that need to get done. And so we need to be very intentional about what our priorities are and what things we need to get done, and then managing our time. I'm not suggesting that you write out every 30 seconds or 30 minutes of your day, although maybe for some of you that's what works. But I do think how I plan is every night or every morning, and this isn't just homeschool, this is for my whole life, I write a list of bullet points of 3 to 5 things that I am going to accomplish either the next morning or, if I do it at breakfast, that day. And if they're bigger things, sometimes it's 1 or 2 things. Sometimes it's 5 or 6 things if they're smaller things. And then throughout that day, I have some intention for my day and what I'm going to work on that day. And that helps me stay on track so that, life doesn't happen and it gets to be 4 o'clock and I need to make dinner and nothing has happened that day. And then at the end of the day, if there's things on my checklist of my essentials that didn't get done, well, then sometimes they get pushed to tomorrow, and that's okay too. But by having a little bit of a plan, literally writing 3 little things on a list, I'm taking control of my day again so that I don't just lose all of that time. So I just think that no matter how structured or unstructured you need to be based on what works for you, have a plan. And the tools that can be helpful for you to make that plan, if you're using a curriculum, they often have a checklist for you, or they have day-to-day what your lessons should be. If you're not using a curriculum, or if you're using a curriculum and you want to be able to pick and choose what to do, using these standards can help you make the decisions on what the most important things are. And our planning sheets that we wrote earlier today with your priorities for your child, that's the other thing that's really going to help you make the decisions about what matters here. Because you're going to have to say no to things. That's how life works. There are only so many hours in a day, we cannot do all of it. But our kids need to be our priorities. So, let's see. Let's go to here. Does anybody want to share something that has worked well for them in homeschooling, or maybe something that hasn't worked well? Because I think we can learn just as much from things that don't work as we do from things that work. All right, why don't you guys turn to your neighbor, or if your neighbor is your family member, turn to somebody in front of you or behind you, and just spend a couple of minutes talking about things that you've done as a family that have been very successful, or things that haven't been successful, and why. Or let's share. This is a great time to network with other parents, because I think that that's another important thing with homeschooling or working from home or staying at home, is having a network and being around people who maybe share some of your priorities or some of your values, especially spiritual values, but then being able to share and bounce ideas off of each other. Because when we work together, our ideas get so much stronger. So turn to somebody that's not in your family, but near you, and just spend a couple minutes sharing. Yeah.
You went to Southern. How did you always know you were going to go to Southern? Because I'm kind of thinking of my kids. Like, there's Wawa, Southern, Neymar, and all.
Yeah.
Just, and kind of, maybe not necessarily yourself, but, when kids are coming up, trying to kind of help guide them towards, like you did education. We've tried to steer my daughter towards healthcare, Southern
Yeah.
versus other schools?
Yeah. So I think that it's a very personal decision, first of all. I started at Andrews
Oh,
because
okay.
I'm from Michigan
Yeah.
and it was close. And I quite honestly, I graduated from an Adventist academy in Michigan and all of my friends went to Andrews. And so it just made sense, right? Because it was an hour from home. My friends were there. Um, but I quickly realized that it wasn't a good fit for me when I was there. And so I started researching other universities, and I knew I wanted to be a teacher, so I looked at which of our Adventist universities had stronger teaching programs. And then I narrowed it down, and then I went and visited. And I mean, for me, it was just made perfectly clear. Like, God made it very clear which school I needed to be at.
So
And,
as a parent, we're just kind of supportive and,
right.
they want to go check out a school,
Mm-hmm.
kind of helping to
Yeah.
facilitate that. Yeah, I guess the closest Adventist school to where we are is Pacific Community College.
Okay.
Well, unless you count Newman,
Well,
and that's really close.
I think it's important to recognize too that every university has a different atmosphere and different values. And so, like Andrews, when I went there, it was very secular, an Adventist institution by name, but walking around campus, you wouldn't know. At least at the time I was there. This was a long time ago.
We visited
Um,
Andrews, and
yeah.
like you said, you don't know the atmosphere because you're just passing through.
Right. And I went to visit Southern because I had friends at Southern, and I loved it. And the program made more sense to me too, like the layout of the program. And at the time that I went to Southern, the education program was amazing. I really came out of the program feeling very well prepared for teaching and for feeling like I knew what I needed to know. Um,
They have a good teaching program. Because we went and visited just the campus. We didn't visit the school. Southern, Andrews, CC, Washington Adventist Works, Kettering, and then we've been to Lamar, and the kids know about Moreland already. But my daughter seemed to kind of gravitate towards Southern.
I
Well, I
loved
think
it.
my hope would too.
Southern also, I don't know for the other universities because I haven't been to most of them, but Southern had is a very active campus, and there's so much, like something that was important to me was outdoor activities, and there's so much to do at Southern.
Okay.
Um, so I loved my experience there, but again, that was almost 10 years ago,
Yeah.
and everything can change in that time frame.
And then as far as like kind of guiding people towards finding their career, sounds like you kind of already had your mind made up.
In high school, was between a few different careers, and I honestly couldn't tell you what made me make the decision. And as someone who has a degree and doesn't even use it, well, sort of uses it, but um,
That's common.
it is. And I think it's important to just know that it's common to not do the career that you were trained in. Um, Maybe even if you're totally unsure, to spend a year or two at a community college and try to figure that out. Job shadow people, spend time like in the fields that you're interested in.
Is Southern big on like being a student missionary?
Yeah, they have a very strong student missionary program, and that's a great thing to do. I did that in between my sophomore and junior year, and my husband did it too. When he was he's a nurse, so he finished his associates um, and then went and then came back and finished his bachelor's. I'm in the program. All right, if I can just pull your attention back up towards the front for a few minutes. I need I used to use a chime in my classroom to get everyone's attention. Right? Or if you can hear my voice, put your hands on your head. If you can hear my voice, touch your nose. All right, thank you. I feel bad because I rushed through my presentation thinking I needed to end at 10, and it wasn't. But I'm very curious to hear what you guys just talked about. What are some things, can anyone share? What are some things experiences that your family, maybe like weekly things that your family does, or neat activities that you've done that have enriched your homeschooling experience? Crickets. All right, thank you.
I didn't share any of those things though. Sorry, I didn't do that. But my kids are older, so we've been doing this for a while. But I'm also a working mom, so I have to work and I have to try to homeschool, and that's hard. So I was just sharing with what's your name, Katharina. I was sharing with Katharina that I thought I was going to do sunlight. I was like, okay, I'm going to do Advent's education, and we're going to follow this curriculum, but it didn't work. And so being flexible and being okay to change my curriculum was good for me. And then we had to go through a few until we found one that fit. And my girls have two totally different personalities, two totally different learning styles. And that was like, oh, a whole nother stress on that process. They're 2 years apart because my older one is born in September. I kept her grade back, so I have them studying at the same grade level. So not having, my family is not Christian, I'm newly Christian, so fighting also against the pressure of the world and everyone saying, oh, your kids can't read, oh, they can't, and them feeling bad and me feeling bad. I had to really be, really prayerful and get through it. And, we're okay. They started reading, and now they're reading like crazy. Like, they can't stop reading books. And following Ellen White's method, even in that regard, it was like, you know what? She's right. The methods are working, and there's nothing to stress over. But having to have the confidence, and I also teamed up with a bunch of other women that were doing sunlight. So even though I'm not following sunlight, I still have that support group. So it's nice to have that also when the rest of the world is saying what you're doing is wrong, they're not meeting the standards, all of that. So I'm sharing that to say, if you have those concerns, don't worry about it. Follow what you believe God is telling you to do, and He'll do the rest.
Thank you. I think that was a great piece to add, is just that our kids learn at different rates, and that's okay. If your child is a little bit behind, according to the standards, don't worry about it. If your child is ahead according to the standards, move with them. That's the beauty of homeschooling, is nobody knows your child better than you. And you're not trying to teach 20 kids, you're trying to teach, I don't know, 1, 2, 4, 5, whatever, however many kids you have. They get so much attention. And you now have the opportunity to meet their needs. And it doesn't matter if your kid learns to read at 5 or if your kid learns to read at 9. By the time they're 15, they're reading. And so you get to follow what your child needs. And I think, as a general rule, we kind of want to follow grade levels-ish. But I plan to move through these standards by year based on when my kid's ready for it. We're going to stay in kindergarten. We'll stay in kindergarten until he's 7 if that's what he needs. Or we'll move on to first grade if he's moving through it. Right now, he loves to do schoolwork for about 5 minutes. And then he's like, can I go play with my Legos? And so you get to follow what your child needs. And as your children get older, 10, 12, 15, you're going to have to be a little bit more, you have to do something. You have to learn how to read. You have to have the equivalent of a high school diploma by the time we're done with this. But especially when they're younger, you have so much freedom to educate them as they're ready for it. Because truthfully, if we're not ready to learn something, we're not going to learn it, no matter how many people beat you over the head with the book. So thank you for sharing that. I probably didn't stress that enough in my talk. Did anybody else have something that they would share with us?
So I don't have any children of my own, but I do have 8 children. I'm a teacher at Centerville Christian School in Tennessee, and so what I've found especially really good is to really be intentional about getting outdoors. So if you want to get your children outdoors and to
Thank you. I agree that it's super important to get your kids outside, and as much as you can to incorporate the nature or the garden into your lesson so that that's the tool you're using to teach them. But sometimes it's not possible, and that's the time that you take a blanket out in the yard and you lay down and read books out in the yard. Any time that you're spent outside is, I think, is valuable and is helpful for you and your child in so many ways. And sometimes that's a learned thing. Sometimes going outside is a huge distraction. But the more you do it, the easier it gets. And I think it's always worthwhile to spend more time in nature. So thank you. Anybody else? I know I missed a lot of stuff in my presentation, but this is what happened to my notes. So, yes, ma'am.
I had a question about very beginning where you had the chart and you said resources. I looked at your handouts on the
Yeah.
line. It didn't have it, so I don't
Oh,
know if
okay. Do you?
it has a little. No, you had a boxes where reflecting. Do you know which one?
I can pull it up. Oh no, I can't pull it up. Hold on. There's my mouse.
You said there's a link, but I couldn't find it online.
I'm sorry. Which? Oh, it's the Littles and Me.
Okay.
thelittlesandme.com. I guess it didn't make it on my recommended resources on the handout. It's called thelittlesandme.com. The Littles. It's right here. Sorry. And this long link is specifically to the homeschool planning worksheet. But if you just do thelittlesandme.com, it'll take you to the main website, and you should be able to search it as well. I'm sorry. That's my oversight. It didn't make it on that list.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
I homeschool my children through high school, so it's been a long time. But I would just tell the moms to not stress. To be flexible. To by the time they are in high school, they are learning by themselves. My son took trigonometry, and I don't know the first thing about that. But he just did it on his own. He did some classes with the video classes, and so on. But for some of the harder things. But whenever we would get to one of those days where just nothing's working, I would of course go to prayer, and then we would go. We would not have school. We would go to the park or to some outside place and just do nature things, something like that. But it's just not the most important thing is that you do not become so stressed that you just are on their case, because it's not good for their character building either, So it takes. You sometimes wonder why you're doing this. At least I do, And yeah, it's the Lord's going to help you. That's what you count on. So.
Thank you. I really appreciate that feedback. When I was in university, I took a year and went as a student missionary to Kenya. And I taught at Maxwell Adventist Academy in the 1st through 4th grade. And when I showed up, I was in school to be a teacher, but I had only done general so far, and so I had no idea what to do. And I showed up, and I was literally handed the key to a classroom and a stack of textbooks and said, the kids will be here next week, figure it out. And the one piece of advice I was given was that the kids are going to learn no matter what you do, so just, do the best you can. And you can't take that advice too far because you need to do things. But the thing is, the kids are going to learn either because of you or in spite of you. And we want the kids to be learning because of us. And the most important thing is to create in our kids a lifelong love for learning and knowing how to learn. And so I think, we have standards to help us know what to teach, but the most important thing is to help them know how to learn and love to learn so that no matter what they choose to do with their lives, they have the tools they need to be successful. And I think that that's the point of one of the big points of homeschooling. So thank you very much for that feedback. All right, anyone else? And then I think it's pretty much time to go. Yes?
About sanity for mom as
Yeah.
leave her home all day with both the kids, and then just,
I understand.
I know she's gung ho getting ready for this homeschool
Uh-huh.
experience, but the sanity for the parents I think is pretty important. So, what is your answer or solution?
Well,
Maintaining your sanity?
I don't think I have an answer or a solution. I understand. And I think that maybe that's one of the most helpful things is finding people that can relate to you, but people that, it's a safe space to say, look, I love my kids, but can I just lock them out of the house for a while because I need a few minutes to breathe. Things that I do, when my husband's home, I lock myself in the bathroom and spend 30 minutes in the shower because it's the only place that the kids can't find me. I think it's hard, and I'm right there with you because it looks like we're in very similar situations right now. Looks like we might have some.
I could give you some ideas. I did adventure club, and sometimes when the kids are in there and playing, you network with other homeschool moms or just mom and dad and just vent. Sometimes it's just nice to see not talking to the little ones, but talking to the normal your age people and just vent. And that just relieves some of my insanity. You be refreshed and then go on another week. So.
I think, at the stage and I don't know about older kids yet, but with little ones, especially when they're really small and you don't always get enough sleep and they just hang on you for everything and you wake up in the middle of the night to hands all over you, it can be hard to not lose your sanity. And I think there's a few things. Is one, just making sure that you are still rooted and grounded in Scripture and remembering your purpose right now is your kids. And that maybe that wasn't before. Before you had kids, you had a different purpose. And maybe when they're out of the house, you'll your life will look different again. But during this stage, your purpose are those little ones. But also finding, and working for that purpose, but also, holding on to things that also that made you before you had kids. Because it's the biggest life change ever to now, all you do is you're responsible for little ones' lives. And I think you just have to find the few things, little breaks, little pockets of space and time to also still be working on you. And that helps your kids, because if your kids see you learning and trying new things or keeping up a hobby, maybe not the same hobbies. Pre-children, I ran half marathons and hiked and was super active, and now a half a mile hike is a chore. But you find different hobbies that work for you during this time to help you still have, pockets of time that is about improving yourself as a person.